have some questions from the non-autistic spouse, and I'd love to hear you address them. So the first one is, can my spouse who's on the spectrum ever express more with their face? Is there something that they can do, or is this kind of it? I know my daughter really struggled with a social smile, so getting like class pictures was always really difficult. I'd usually have to be there and like make her laugh or do something that actually got a laugh, because a social smile was super hard for her, and smiling with the eyes is very difficult as well.
Yeah,
So, what would you say about people learning how to express things differently on their face or be more expressive with their face?
but why does it have to be on the face? Why don't we say, can my spouse learn to express his feelings in German? The face is only one of the many ways to communicate what you're feeling. You can do that with your face. You can do that with numbers. You can do that with colors. You can do that with words. You can do that with gestures. You can do that with pictures. You know, let's not focus on the form of expression and the form of communication. Let's focus on the need and the emotion that needs to be communicated. And let's find the easiest way to communicate, because otherwise we're asking the impossible. Expressing feelings is already difficult, and then we ask them to use a form of expressing that is most difficult. It will be like me saying to you now, okay, I want you to continue the rest of this interview in Dutch.
That would not be happening.
That would not be happening, because you would say, Peter,
Not my
that's
language.
that's that's too difficult. That's not my language. And if using a facial expression is not your language, what would you do with an okay, if I would work with a child who's English speaking, and I'm Dutch, I speak Flemish, and I think, okay, communication is already difficult for you. I'm going to learn your language rather than you have to learn my language.
Right. So I
So
wanted to hear you say that, because I know for us, one of our strategies is Dan might write me notes. He might send me a
exactly.
song. He might go on YouTube, and this song, when I heard this song, I thought about you. And then, because he's a musician, he enjoys music. And I have always enjoyed that. And then say, well, what part of the song does it remind you of me? And we'll have a conversation about it. And then to me, if you think about the basic thing for attachment, you exist in my mind. I know I exist in his mind, and that he was thinking of me when he heard that song. And so that's important to me. And he very much can articulate feelings very much better in writing, in a card or in a notebook. It's
Exactly. Yes.
completely
And
different than verbal.
what about sending a WhatsApp? What about sending an email to your spouse? And I know that's not the common way of communication in couples, but every day everybody uses WhatsApp now. Okay, I don't use it with my wife except when I'm traveling. Then I WhatsApp with her. But when I'm at home, I don't send her a WhatsApp from the kitchen. But I know couples where one person has autism, and that's the way of communication. And since they WhatsApp each other, it improves the communication and the mutual understanding, because it's also the other way around. If an autistic person gets a WhatsApp, they have processing time. They can read, say, okay, can you give an example? And then, by slowing down the communication process and, for instance, saying, this is a song that expresses how I feel, or this is a movie, or this is a picture or a drawing, and again, you're right, Stephanie, we have now, for World Autism Awareness Day, we have now an exhibition with 50 very able adults. We asked all of them, can you express in a visual way how you experience your autism? In other words, can you either make a drawing or a painting yourself? Or is there any drawing or painting that or picture or photograph that expresses how you experience your autism? It's amazing how rich that language is. But if we would ask them to show and just to talk and using the neurotypical communication, many of them would have difficulties. If I would just ask them, how do you experience your autism? Many of them would say, sorry, Peter, I cannot answer that. But if I gave them the instruction, try to browse on the internet until you find a picture, a photograph that you think, oh, that's me. And it's amazing the diversity of things that we get back and how rich it is. So yes, autistic people can express, but please let's give them the opportunity to express in ways that are easy for them.
So the next question that comes, so I do a lot of couples work, and well, I'm just going to say the neurotypical wife, because it tends to happen this way, and maybe has a lot of big feelings. I have a lot of things I want to express. There's a hurt that happened here. We don't get to resolve a lot of problems. It's Groundhog's Day. We wake up and it feels like whatever we talked about yesterday is not being implemented today. It's very frustrating. and wants to express this. So I've devised some things I call it pause, break, and table, which is let's take a 1 minute pause, let's take a 5 minute pause, let's take a 15-minute pause. And then sometimes it gets too elevated. We table it. We can't do it today. We're going to have to say, let's Saturday. I get a lot of pushback on that, Dr. Peter. Like, that's not how communication should happen. We should just be able to talk about it. I don't want to stop the conversation right now. That's not working for me. So can you kind of address maybe the need that, when a neurotypical spouse needs to express emotions or hurt or pain to their autistic spouse, maybe are some strategies, and is there benefit to slowing down these things and giving pause breaks and sensory breaks when you're having a discussion?
There is, there's definitely a benefit of slowing down the information, because autistic people, it's not that they can process information, it's not that they lack the intelligence, but the speed of the information, especially when it's about emotions or very abstract topics like trust, and reciprocity in relationship, that's very abstract. Then they have a hard time taking that in. It's not that they cannot take it in, but it takes them more time. And usually the classical way of meetings is sitting at a table and talking, which then involve even a lot of body language when the discussion gets a little bit heated, a lot of body language to take in as well. What I say is not only slow down, but if you really, again, want your autistic husband to show more understanding for your position and your experiences, give him the information in advance so he can process it in advance in an email, in a letter, and then you discuss the letter. Then the information is not new anymore in the meeting. Then he can ask questions. What do you mean with this or that? Because often they miss the speeds in order to quickly ask, oh, wait a minute, what do you mean here? Can you give an example? So they're still processing, and then the other party is going on and going on. So prepare it and already write what you want to say in advance with the agreement. We don't discuss the letter here. We discuss it together with Stephanie on Saturday. But then it will be not completely new information anymore.
Absolutely. And that's a struggle sometimes for the neurotypical spouse, because again, that's not kind of normal couple communication. But I think for me, I didn't even know my husband was on the spectrum. I just, as a therapist, picked up on I cannot come to him and say, hey, we need to make this decision about our child's daycare and we got to do it by Friday. That would be, he'd be overwhelmed. He'd avoid. He'd say, I haven't had time to do any research. I just have to trust the research you've given me, which I used to get very offended by. Like, what do you mean you don't trust the research? And he's like, well, do you want me to kind of add to this discussion, or do you just want me to pick from your options? If you really want me to add to the discussion, I've got to have time to either do my own research,
Exactly.
Look at your research. And so even before we found out he was on the spectrum, that's just kind of a way I was like, okay, what do I really want? I really want a partner and share the mental load. And I really do want him to weigh in on the decision. I don't want him to rubber stamp my information. So I get that. And so we would kind of have like, okay, babe, by Friday, we need to make a decision about X. So here's the information I have. You do you. And on Friday, let's come back and talk about what's the decision that we're going to make. And that made a huge difference in sharing the mental load and being able to talk through it, because like you said, he had the information, had already processed it. And now we could start looking through options and problem solving together, which was just too much before.
And it's not only about the processing time. It's also about clarity. What is the goal of the meeting and what do I want from you? As you say, if the goal of the meeting, you only have to listen to me, then it's okay to not to prepare it in advance, because then the autistic person knows I don't have to react. I only need to listen. But often what we want is not that they just listen. We also want them to apologize. We want them to say, okay, I did not know that. I'm going to change my behavior. Or so what is the real expectation? And I think clarifying the expectations and the goal of the meeting should be clear. If the goal of the meeting is indeed, look, I already did the research. I want you to just know what I found out and to say, that's okay. That's a different goal of a meeting than saying, I want the two of us think together about the different options and take a decision together. Now, that's a different goal of a meeting. And if you clarify that in advance, I think many autistic people say, oh, wait a minute, if I have to take a decision, I want to be well informed. So then we organize it in such a way that you can come to the meeting with already your own research. It's, and in that way, you could compare it to meetings in big companies. What if big companies, the board would meet and have no written agenda in advance? We're going to talk about this and that and that. And you could say, but yeah, but a marriage or a couple is not a company. In a way, it is. In a way,
It's
it
a team.
is.
Hopefully, it's a team. We want it to
It's a
be a team.
team. Exactly. It's a team that works together to make the company healthy and good, and to make the relationship healthy and good. Actually, it's the same. It's an organization, and okay, an organization could be two, could be 2,000. The size might be different, but it's the same way. And the also the verbal talking and why the written language. I sometimes ask them, but what if your husband would be blind? Would you also expect him to read your facial expressions and to take into account what you're feeling? You will have to say it if somebody's blind. What if he was deaf? Shouting wouldn't help. So, okay, this is not deaf, this is not blind, but this is a brain that is in certain ways also blind and deaf. And the moment you start seeing it that way, it doesn't mean that in a relationship, it's the non-autistic or the neurotypical individual who has to adapt all the time to the autistic person. I think in a good relationship, there should be a balance in give and take. So autism is never an excuse to say I'm autistic, so I can't help it. No, 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 no. Even if you're autistic, you have your responsibility in a relationship. But I think if we want to help them to take their responsibilities and to take into account the feelings of the other partner, then we need to speak a language so that they can take in the information. And most autistic individuals that I know, the moment it's clear for them, it's like, oh, now I understand. Oh, yes. And then they are very positive and very motivated to do good.
Well, I work in a very niche where religion and faith come in there. And so sometimes that causes a little extra pause because if I'm the man and I'm in charge, then I shouldn't have to. So that's a little blip I have to deal with sometimes.
Yeah.
But I heard you address this and I would love it to come from you because I know what I say. But sometimes when we're working with a dysregulated state and the person on the spectrum curses, calls names, I call it verbal vitriol or verbal vomit. They would say, I can't help it. He or she is just going to have to deal with it because I'm autistic and I can't regulate that and my filter's off. Can you address that?
No, autism is never an excuse. Yeah, okay, you're entitled to have every emotion that you have, but the moment you start acting upon your emotions, you have an effect on other people. And that is something that you need to take into account. You can't just do anything. You always have an effect on other people, and you don't want other people to shout at you, probably. Well, you don't shout at other people. But it's okay to be angry, and let's find out how you can be angry or how you can be disappointed or whatever. But again, it requires work on both sides. We're working now with ambassadors that I train to go out and work on an autism-friendly society, and I've taught them two questions or two things. When you go out, you always say, what do I expect from you to make the world more autism friendly to me? But what do you expect from me? And it's the same in a relationship. What do I expect from you? And what do you expect from me? And can we meet each other somewhere halfway? It does not necessarily have to be halfway, but at least somewhere halfway. And therefore saying, I can't help, I'm autistic, that would also mean that autistic people have no control. But sometimes they're the biggest control freaks in the world. So they do have the abilities to control. That it's not easy for them. And that, again, the cone turns upside down in even an unpredictable moment for them. Yes, that's all true. But that does not mean that you cannot start working on that.
Absolutely. I wish I would have asked you this before we started talking because I don't want to throw in something that maybe you haven't heard of. And it could even be you. I heard it from during COVID when a lot of things went online. I was watching a conference that I would have never have gotten to attend. And that was Europe based of all European people that I hadn't got to learn from. And they someone mentioned the mood meter. Are you familiar with the mood meter and how it works? Okay. So will you talk about the mood meter? Because I try, again, I struggle sometimes to get the adults because most of the men and women I work with are high IQ, very successful in their job. Again, didn't get diagnosed till over the age of 40 because somebody else did. Then we followed it up the tree. And then the relationship is the issue. But like I shouldn't have to do that. But I think the mood meter is pretty cool. So will you talk about how that is
Yeah, well,
helpful?
that the mood meter, it could be one of the alternative ways to express how you're feeling and what your state of mind is. And again, it's atypical. I know that, but on the other hand, a lot of these apps that we have on our smartphones, I get every morning I get my stress results of the former day. They're actually visualize something that is mental, and I think, why do we accept it from a smartphone, and why don't we accept it if we put it in the kitchen, for instance, saying, I come home and I'm in this mood? One of the things that I love about some of the conferences that I go to right now who try to be autism friendly are those stickers. That's kind of a mood meter as well in social terms. Like green means, okay, you can just talk to me. I'm open to any conversation. Yellow means I'm into conversation, but I would like to start. Again, the perceived control. So I can talk to you, but please don't start the conversation with me. And red means, please leave me alone. I've already trouble enough navigating this conference that conversations would be too much. Though that's also kind of a mood meter. And sometimes, as a joke, I say that I collect all the leftovers at conferences. And after work, when I drive home, I choose one of the stickers in my car. And when I come home, I show my wife, okay, what's going to happen tonight? And then everybody has to laugh. But I think in some relationships, this could be very helpful, I think. And again, it's a bit weird, but what's weird about a smartphone giving you a certain number of your stress? It's everything that helps. And I think making it concrete, slowing down, and giving processing time, because it could also help to express how you're feeling if you can choose from a color. And it doesn't have to be a color. With children, sometimes I use characters like cars, or even the ones from the Disney film around emotions. You could use whatever. I've worked with an adult, and he found it very difficult every time we met to talk about his well-being. But he had an interest in math. So what I did is I asked him every day to tell me how much percent happiness he had experienced that day, and I put that then in a graph, and that helped us to discover lines in his functioning. Now, I think many people would feel uncomfortable saying, like, I feel 56% happy today. But for him, that helped him to monitor his own state of mind. And if that helps, again, it should help the communication. And that's the point, understanding each other in a relationship, isn't it?
Right.
And the form that we do it does not have, there isn't even a normal form. Because when I express how I feel to my wife, I do it in Dutch. I think you don't do that in Dutch. So
No.
we already use a different form.
So and one of the reasons I think is sometimes back to like autism friendly, the feeling wheel, which has been out a long time, that can sometimes be overwhelming to my autistic folks, because you have to kind of already know that you're looking for a happy feeling, find that wedge, and then kind of work backwards. Whereas the mood meter starts at the bottom of pleasant to unpleasant. First, just let me decide, is it pleasant to unpleasant, and kind of find that quadrant. And then, okay, what's the intensity and frequency? It kind of looks like a math quadrant. And then now I know that it's pleasant. How pleasant? Is it a little bit pleasant? Is it very much pleasant? Is it elevated? And now I've at least got a window of 5 things I can choose from. And now I can maybe articulate that in a different way. So I love it. It's one of my favorite
Yes,
tools,
and
but
and
getting
start with
adults to do it's
simple.
hard.
No, and start with simple, because I can understand that some spouses, they say it's like a closed door. I don't have access to his feelings. But again, can you help him to express? And if you help him by asking him very simple questions, okay, is it positive or negative? And when it's positive, would you think it's more? That often helps them. So expressing emotions, there's a common responsibility in helping each other to do that. And again, it goes both ways. He has to learn, but she can help him to learn.
So let me kind of summarize some of the things we'll talking about today, and then I'm going to have you tell us how to find you and your website and books that are coming out. But we kind of started with well-being is far more than independent skills and functionality, which is important. But well-being and mental health also means what is kind of value add to the person, and learning to regulate emotions means don't wait until you're already at the jumping off point. We can be intentional, either sensory diets, the happy bag and the happy plan for kids, different list for adults. We have to be careful. We can't expect someone on the spectrum to communicate expressions the same way. So let's find other ways that can communicate that in a couple. And then we, as the neurotypical spouse partner, must also temper how we bring our emotions, which can be overwhelming. We still get to express our emotions and say what we're talking about. You are not saying in any way, we just totally accommodate autism to the detriment of our own needs, but this kind of finding that space to accommodate each other and work together as a team. And so I already know about your book, the Predictive Coding Error book, because I've read it and I'm citing it, but you've got some other work out there. So we kind of tell the listeners your site, how to find you, and some of the work that you have out there or about to come out.
Okay, so my name is Peter Vermeulen, which is difficult to pronounce, but for typing it, it's easy. So my website is www.petervermeulen.be because I'm from Belgium. There you will find where I present. So indeed, I will be presenting in the USA again this spring. My latest projects are indeed the book on the predictive coding in autism, which is quite academic and a little bit technical. It's not easy
Very,
to
not a little
digest.
bit, very,
Yes,
very.
but I'm working together with another person on a very basic version for children and young adults that explains it. Another project is my book on, together with a colleague, for parents and teacher, and the title is Autism: What Really Works, and it's about the 10 basic needs of children, going from clarity, predictability to autonomy to being understood, belonging, whatever. Where we start not from the autism characteristics, but needs are universal. How can we address those needs in autistic children? Those two are my latest products. And then I have a new book that is also translated into English, or yes, will be translated, hopefully. And that's how to talk with children about their problems using drawings. It's called Draw Talk. As we said, as we spoke, just common communication tools that we use, sitting at a table talking, is not always autism friendly. If you have a piece of paper and you can make drawings about what you're talking, it's more fun for kids, but it's also clarifying a lot of those difficult things that they find hard to express. Draw Talk.
I love that. I hope I get to see you at the conference. They usually stick me away in a back room doing interviews. So I love getting to talk with every speaker one-on-one and ask my questions that I want, because I love it. But at the other time, I don't get to actually see people's faces because I'm in a little room interviewing people. But I hope I get to see you in South Carolina. And I thank you so much for being on the podcast today. As we like to remind our listeners, there is hope for your future. We want you to know that you are not alone on this journey.